A number of y'all have been asking for some sort of tune-up or maintenance video on the FZ-07. Colored now. Got most everything done at this point. Still have a chain and sprockets to do, but before I put the tank and all the bodywork back on, sync the throttle bodies. It's getting real crazy. Let me explain what's happening here. You've got two throttle bodies on this bike, right? One for each cylinder. One of them, usually the one that the throttle's directly linked to, that's usually like your fixed one. The other one can actually be adjusted how open or shut the throttle blade is, or in the case of this bike, it has like a little bleed over circuit for the idle. That's adjustable. What you want to do is you want to make sure that at idle, they have the same vacuum pool on them. This will make them run better. The bike's been idling a little bit low lately, and I reckon this would help out. It doesn't have a ton of miles on it, but I know this isn't something that's balanced from the factory to begin with. They don't really mess with that, especially since the bike hasn't been broken in. I went online and I found this tool is actually only 30 bucks. This is a little vacuum bleeding tool. This one just works off pure air. Different ones that are a little more accurate than this. For the sake of this bike, I'm sure anything's better than how it is. We're gonna hook vacuum lines from here to each of the throttle bodies. We're going to fire the bike up, let it get up to temperature, and then we're going to adjust, have the same amount of vacuum on both these gauges. We should see the idle being really smooth. This is also something you want to do at the very end of a job. Like, you don't want to like do this and then change the plugs or adjust the valves or anything like that. You always want to make this like be the last tuning thing you do so no other element could possibly affect it. The other tricky thing with this bike is because it is fuel injected, we have to do this with the tank on. I'm going to try to prop it up because I can get this tool down in here. Ideally, you'd want one of those screwdrivers on a little gear that turns it down. That would be much better because you could come in kind of right through the side. You have to balance these gauges out to make sure that they're exactly the same. In order to do that, you want to connect both of them to one cylinder and make sure that they're pulling the same amount of vacuum. Run one of these to cylinder one here, and then we'll balance the system to start. I'm just going to put these back screws in here. I'm not going to tighten them down. Leave them loose so I can still pivot the tank on this point. This is a vacuum line that goes up to some kind of sensor, it looks like, and I guess you can get away with running without it just while you're tuning. I mean, the sensor will still be plugged in so the computer won't know anything is up. The one on the other side is definitely in here a bit. For right now, I'm just going to clamp off the other side so we don't have like a massive air leak on it. All right, so I've got everything connected here. Hammer wedging the tank in the upper position. If I take my little screwdriver here, by the way, these are just vent lines. It doesn't matter if you're not hooked up, unless you're in California. Someone would be very upset with you. But I can get down. You have to trust me, I can't do it with the camera in the way. Yes, I can. There it is, I'm on it. So that's how we adjust the other one right there. We should have no check engine lights. Fuel tank is priming. We're going to be balancing the gauges to start. The gauges is balanced. There's a bunch of writing on these gauges. I'm not really all that concerned with what this means. There are certain manuals and things that'll say, oh, you know, balance this to negative something. That doesn't matter. What we're mainly looking for is this gauge is going to go to a number, and we're going to try to adjust the other throttle body that will be on this gauge to match this gauge. And if we do that, it should be just fucking great. So we'll prop that like this. Well, that's actually perfect. That's what they put that there for. So we're getting a check engine light right now. And we looked it up, and this means that it has the, explain again, Ian?
This means that the intake air pressure sensor is either clogged or detached.
Which it is detached right now.
It is detached, so actually this is an expected thing, and it's good that it came in. It means that it's working properly.
Yeah, so what's fine right now, we'll probably just reset everything when we're done. I'll probably just do a battery reset, but we can ignore that for now. Best we can do is go ahead and let the engine warm up. The gauges are bouncing like this. You just turn these little adjusters in until they slow way down. If you can shut them completely, that's no good. You still want to be pulling some bit of a vacuum here. So almost like that right there is pretty good. It's not so important that these are like perfectly tuned to each other. It's not like this is changing the tuning of the gauges. This is just changing how much it fluxes in each direction. We've hit temperature now. I already see a slight variance in the gauges. I'm gonna call that good. Look that vacuum thing back up and let's see how it runs then. Also, might not be a bad idea while I'm doing all that, I'm gonna disconnect the battery just so it clears that code completely. Thrown the tank back on, hooked up all our hoses, reconnected the battery, and the check engine light's off now. Check out how it idles now. Before doing all this work, when you would slowly rev the throttle back, you'd almost get like kind of this not a stutter, but like kind of like almost like a hesitation. Then it would start to rev up, and you can see now if I just barely pull the throttle back. It's very happy to rev right up. It seems like the balancing of the throttle bias was definitely a good idea. Obviously all the fluid changing, the new spark plugs, all that stuff was also kind of icing on the cake there. But really happy with all that. I'm going to start putting all the body work back on, and then we can do the chain sprockets, and this bike is done.
Alright, so when you're putting these on, make sure you reset the clips, pop it out like that. You'll see it push up, and then place them in there, get them set, and then push the pin in.
I'm going to pop the big side fairing back on. There's a little rubber piece right here, and another mel into the other thing over here, which will be up front. I've always found it's best to go ahead and put just a dab of WD-40 on them. Just helps pop them on, and it won't hurt the rubber or the plastic, despite what the internet will tell you. A lot of times if you don't have that on there, you're going to push these in, they end up just getting kind of folded in, or they pop back off with the piece. They don't stay where they should. A little bit of lubrication can help with that. This is the OEM chain that came on the bike, and the bike only has 5,000 miles, so the chain really should be in just fine shape. But if we look at it here, you can see there's a lot of little rust spots on it. There's definitely some links that are getting kinked up. I don't know what I could have possibly done to make it. You could clean a lot of the surface rust off and probably keep this thing going, but it does have a slack already in it. It's making a lot of noise, and a lot of these rollers are even kind of loose if you feel them. I just figured while we're doing all this other work, I would like to go ahead and just throw a new one on there. If you go and like look up your bike and you try to buy a specific chain and sprocket kit, they're almost always like $150 to $170, even $200 sometimes. And that's mainly just because they packaged it all up for you and made it easy. What I like to do is actually go onto, like, JT is really good for this. You go onto their website and you can find your bike, and it'll show you all the factory sizes and everything, and you can look up the part numbers. Then I'll go over to like Amazon and I'll search directly for those part numbers, and I can get all this stuff, which I think instead I paid close to about $100 for everything. You can say $50 to $100 sometimes off of one of these kits, just by going and finding the individual parts and buying them all like that. Because these sprockets fit a number of different bikes. It's not just, one bike. It's not even just Yamaha. A lot of this stuff is multi-stuff. All these chains are basically universal. You just got to figure out how many links it has, and they've got all the specs on there. So that's what we've done. Just gone with the same sizes as before. Gearing on this bike is pretty good in my opinion. When it comes to the OEM chain, one thing that you will find is there is no master link on here. This is the whole thing. I mean, one of them was the master link, but they've got a special tool at the plant when they put these things together, the factory. So what we need to do is cut this chain somewhere. We could just get nuts and try to cut through the whole thing. So what I want to do is just grind down two of these little heads a little bit, and then we'll use a chain breaking tool to push these the rivets out. And a lot of people seem to think you can just take this tool and go right into it and smash these through here. And I'm telling you, you'll break the tool. You can't. You have to. These are rivets that are mushroomed out here on the other end, so you have to at least cut these down. If you don't have like a compressor and like a cutoff wheel or electric cutoff wheel, whatever, I mean, if you have a drill and a little grinding head, I mean, you can get through these still pretty fast. I find too, it's easy to work on one that's on the sprocket. This should be down enough now. Before we can take this cover off, looks like we need to remove this linkage right here. A lot of bikes like this one have a sort of mark here in the factory position that shows you exactly where this thing's supposed to be sitting. But if you had readjusted it, or your bike didn't have a mark on here, you either want to like take note of it, take a picture with your phone, take a marks a lot and put a line on it. Something so when you go to stick it back on, it's in the same place. Look at that, I never noticed this. It has like the shift pattern. To remove the nut, you'll need a big 30mm. Ways that people take this off the wrong way. Leaving the chain on, trying to hold the brake really hard, leaving the bike in gear, trying to use an impact on it. There's tools like this out here. I've shown this in vids before. This is like meant to grab clutch baskets and flywheels. That's what these little notches are for. And it also can lock into gears there pretty good. Take a breaker bar. The good thing is when we go to put it back on, if we do the same method, we can get a torque wrench out and actually put the proper torque on this thing. You'll never be able to do that with the chain on, just trying to hold the rear brake. You don't need a whole super high dollar impact or air compressor with a pneumatic impact. You can just get a breaker bar. You'll have to get the size socket you need anyway. And this tool right here, which you'll use for all kinds of things, like the clutch basket part and the flywheel part is actually something I use more than anything. But grabbing sprockets is just, yeah, trust me, this isn't a super high dollar tool, and this breaker bar isn't a super high dollar tool, and then you can do this the right way. So our replacement sprocket doesn't have the cool rubber around here, which they do that to help eat up some noise and vibration. But the hell with that, because we want that lightweight one. It is a little lighter, you can tell it is. There's no directional to this, from what I can tell. On these splines here, these are just, you know, these are just steel. So what I like to do is I like to put just a little bit of grease on them. You don't have to put like a crazy amount. This is more just to be kind of like rust prevention. Ain't gonna hurt nothing. What do I torque this bolt to? Someone comment below. I'm gonna take a guess that it's gonna be something like, I'm gonna say it's 93 foot-pounds. Watch, it's probably gonna be like 73. Well, I suck at 69 foot-pounds according to the interwebs. Tool back on. There it is. This little notch is here, and technically we're supposed to sort of indention it in here, and 180 degrees later right here. I probably should technically replace this nut every time you change it out, but you know, it's not that big a deal. There's a dead blow and a flathead screwdriver that I only use for crap like this. We'll just a little dent there. It should be good to keep it from unscrewing. And honestly, when you go to just take them off, I don't, you know, it's not like you have to try to wedge these back out. You just take it off, it's fine. It'll work itself out. Before we pull the rear wheel off to pull the sprocket off, I want to go ahead and loosen up all these nuts. That's just because this thing's got a push drive hub. Once you actually have this thing off, it's really difficult. Unscrewed on the ground because the thing just wants to pop out. It's really nice just to get them loose now. You don't have to use an electric impact, but if you got one, I wouldn't fault you for doing this. New sprocket goes on. It had this metal thing on here before. I'm not really sure what purpose it serves, but we're gonna throw it back in there. I mean, you probably could just throw the washers and the nuts back on. It would be just fine, but better be safe. Just go ahead and throw it back on. Let's see if I can get away with tightening this up off the bike. I'm gonna go into some kind of Star of David star pattern, I think. Maximum durability X1R X-Ring drive chain. Black steel. Oh, it's a fucking 70s movie. Black steel, you gotta hold the things down. You know I can hold things down, baby. Demonetized. Let's see. For a long time, I only ever used the rivet style one because I thought, oh, it's stronger, it's better. But honestly, the rivets, I find them really kind of inconsistent, especially over the last few years. They used to be a lot better, but now they just, I don't know, every time I try to use one, I just find they don't mushroom out very well. So I've been using the clip ones, and I use the clip ones on about everything. And I don't know why people are really worried about these ones. They're fine. It's not like it puts a bunch of weird, you know, I don't care if you have a high horsepower, high torque, heavy bike. It's not like it puts tons of side strain on these things. This clip is more than strong enough. They wouldn't sell these if it wasn't. That was actually a big discussion on my Patreon a while back having to do with these things. No, they're fine, man. They're absolutely fine. Link here and the other side and this little clip and a bag with O-rings and some of the grease. And this grease is really good that it comes with because it's the same kind of grease that's already in between all the other links. So we'll want to put a silly amount on there, more than we need, and Kind of let it fart out what's not necessary. You'll grab 2 of your little O-rings out. You'll pop 2 of them on. Slice into our bag of grease. Always cutting away from yourself like a good Girl Scout would. Not really one of those situations where you could have like too much. Stick this in. Stick on my other set of O-rings. Put the writing out. Should be able to press it on enough. Put these clip-ons. Just need to take up the chain slack. This bike has some little adjusting notch thingies. These are never really that perfect. I mean, you got things like this where there's slack. I just don't feel like this is a good measurement. And what we do know is that these are the exact same size on both sides. I've even checked them. I'm gonna use this to measure the distance, how much threads are basically sticking out of one side and make the other side exactly the same. And if we do that, we'll get a much more precise alignment on the back tire. If you didn't have one of these tools, it would be obnoxious, but you could count the threads. I had to bring it in just a little bit to match, so what I need to do is make sure that the chain slack is still good. 70, I think 6 foot-pounds is what the interweb said. And while I tighten it, I'm going to still keep my knee pressed against it because, you know, it can be pulled back. Those are going to do a little more just a maintenance video. I call this a tune-up. Thanks for being patient with me with my kind of erratic schedule lately. I'll see y'all later.